The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape number 11.
We are here today, the four of us. It's going to be real interesting. We've never been on a panel together before. We've been to conferences before, but we've never been on a panel. So, and especially since we have a real small group, we were a fill-in for another group that was originally scheduled. So this has been, come on in, real exciting for us, and we hope, especially if we have a small group, that we'll be able to answer questions, because there's just so much to cover. So I want to introduce everybody, and then we'll let Debbie start. Yeah, I'm clipped on.
No, you start.
Okay. All right. This is my daughter, Debbie, who I gave up for adoption in 1965. This is Esther. This is Debbie's mom, her adoptive mother. And this is Lorraine, my mother. So yeah, we have 3 generations right here, and Esther. And yes, my mother is a great-grandmother because Debbie has children. So this has been real exciting for us. We're each going to tell a little bit about our history, and we've each kind of prepared the things that we felt were the most important that we wanted to share about our feelings in the different stages from the time that I got pregnant and relinquished a child to now that we have been reunited 5 years. So we have some perspective. It's been real interesting. We have other family members that we wish we could have brought in everybody. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm glad you're here. And I guess I'll start with, since I'm the birth mother, I'm the one that got pregnant, I'll go ahead and start. I was 16 years old when I got pregnant, and there weren't a whole lot of choices, and I don't want to talk too much about that other than the feelings and some of the dynamics with the family. And then, of course, my mother will share her perspective, and Esther will share hers, and Debbie will share hers. I was dating the father, and he was very supportive up until about my 4th or 5th month of pregnancy, and then he lost interest. And so he was no longer part of the picture. And of course, at that time, come on in, birth fathers didn't have any rights, and they didn't have to sign anything, and they were not part of the decision. Although in my situation, he and I had actually decided on that plan before we even told my parents I was pregnant. And the pain of relinquishment, of course, is very difficult to talk about. I don't want to spend too much time on that, other than the perception between me and my mother about how I felt and how she thought I felt at that time. When I first decided to search for Debbie and we talked about it, my mother made a comment that she thought that it had been more difficult for her than it had been for me. And I was so surprised I almost fell out of the chair. And I said, well, how could you think that? And she said, well, you never acted like it. And so it was real interesting to me. It seemed like at that time, it was like, were we in the same house? You know, do you remember? Were we on the same planet? You know? But to her perception, because I went back to school and pretended like nothing had happened, she didn't think that it affected me, or that I wasn't sad or grieved, or that I was just going about my business like nothing had happened. And of course that wasn't the case at all. I went back to school and was supposed to pretend like I was a happy 16-year-old when my whole life had changed. So like many others, I did a little alcohol, a little drugs, a lot of men, and I married very early after that. So I have other children. I have another daughter who's 20 by a first marriage, and then I have 2 children by a second marriage. And there's only 2 years between my youngest child and Debbie's oldest child. So I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old grandson. So when I met Debbie, when we decided to search, we were very fortunate because we came through Vista Del Mar, which was a very supportive agency, and because Esther had done quite a bit of preparation. And she had already made contact with that agency. The agency itself was able to help us arrange a meeting. And there was actually about 9 months from the time that my mom first talked to Selma to the time that we actually, well, till I got a name, and then there was another couple months before we actually met. It's been very positive right from the beginning, although the relationship has certainly changed very much over the past 5 years. I think for me it was real exciting to meet Debbie. We were kind of jumping up and down like little kids, where when I met Esther, it was almost more emotional for me to meet her than it was for me to meet Debbie, because it was like one mother to another mother. And I remember standing in the parking lot and we both just cried, and it was real special. It seems hard to believe that it's been that long, because it seems like Debbie's always been part of my life, but there's been a lot of things that have happened and a lot of changes that have taken place in our relationship. We visited frequently. Debbie lives in Los Angeles and I live on the Central Coast, so not as often as we would like, but fairly often, and we've had phone contact. And I don't know if I can say that there was a particular point where the relationship changed, but it was just more of a gradual growing closer. For me, the most significant thing about the reunion has been the healing that has taken place in my life and the work that I've been able to do, because it was a tremendous realization that there was a lot of unresolved grief that had just never been dealt with. And so I did a lot of grief work, and I did a lot of group support and a lot of private therapy. And I was finally able to deal with some of those things that, as a 16-year-old, they came out in different ways, but I had never really gone through the stages and really acknowledged that. And that's fairly common, but of course I didn't know that. I think that some of the highlights in our relationship have been when Debbie got married 2 years ago, that I was privileged enough to be included in the wedding. And Esther and I sat together in the front row as two moms and held hands during the service, and it was like a fairy tale. I mean, it was just like if I could have written my story from the beginning, what the reunion would be like afterwards, I couldn't have written a more perfect ending. It was just really, really special. There also, at that point, we will mention what we called at Florence Crittenton, the FOB, because it rhymes with something else, but it's father of baby. And I did contact him during the search for Debbie. He had said that he would meet her, and she can tell you a little bit about that if she wants, but basically they did meet, so we all know who everybody is. And he was also present at the wedding. And for me, that was real difficult. I was really, really scared. I had not seen him in 22 years, and there were a lot of unresolved feelings for him. Once I thought I had gone through all of the grieving about relinquishing a child, and there was this whole another set of issues to deal with my loss of that relationship with him. And I had written him a letter in which I said that there was still a part of me that was 16 years old that would really like to hear the words, "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." And he didn't respond to that letter. He didn't wish to meet with me before. I wanted to meet with him before Debbie got married, even if it was just to have coffee in the morning before the wedding, because I felt like I was scared. I didn't know what I was going to feel like when I saw him, and I had visions of myself turning into a blob of Jell-O and falling on the floor at his feet or something, I didn't know.
Pretty close.
Yeah, there was a couple minutes there. It was pretty hard, but it was really fun. I was so glad that I did have the opportunity, even if I never have the opportunity to see him again, that I did see him face to face, and it felt real comfortable. And it was real friendly, and I asked him his permission to give him a hug, and I gave him a hug, and after that it was okay. There were a lot of things that I would have liked to have said to him, and yet the occasion was so happy I really didn't want to get into it. And there were several times where I felt that he even tried to, bring up the subject. And there were a lot of opportunities where I could have said something, and I just felt like it was Debbie's day, and I really didn't want to change my focus away from her. And we did talk for quite a while. He did share some very private things with me about his feelings and how he felt connected, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to see him face to face. And that's about all I want to say about him right now. There also has been, since that time, my father was very ill, and he passed away in September. And I think for me, some of the most special things that came in terms of the completion and the healing were Debbie wrote a very, very beautiful letter to my dad. And this is the part I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to share or not, but it was a gorgeous letter telling him how she felt about him as a grandfather, and he shared that with me. And when he was dying, Debbie was right there, and we were all there, and it was real special. And the healing that has come into our life and having her back in the family, I just can't even begin to describe what that feels like. And the fact that he was able to meet her and see his grandchildren before he died was real special. And I think that there's been a lot of cementing of our relationship in those kinds of things. That particularly for me, having her there, I remember when I walked in a couple days before he passed away, and I walked in, and Debbie was sitting on the bed talking to him, and it was like, whoa, I couldn't believe that was really happening. And it's been great. It's been a lot of changes and a lot of growth, and a lot of it's been real painful. There's been misunderstandings and hurt feelings, and we've managed to work through them, some better than others, but I think that we've done pretty well, and I feel real privileged. Esther and I have had the opportunity to share some real special moments. We went to a conference together a few years ago, and that was 2 years ago for the Tri-Adoption Conference that Debbie wasn't there, and it was just the two of us, and we've had some real special moments together, and I feel very privileged. And I feel very privileged to have my mother here. This is real special for me. This is the first time she's ever attended any kind of conference. And
I'm hearing a lot of things I didn't know.
Yeah. So we didn't prepare for this. Esther asked me, my mom asked me, well, what shall I say, what shall I say? And I said, I really didn't want to tell them what to say. I wanted this to be spontaneous and as personal and intimate as we could make it to share with you. And yeah, a lot of these things are going to be the first time we're hearing them too. So if anybody wants to ask something in the middle, go ahead. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and let my mom talk, and then we'll hopefully allow plenty of time at the end for questions. So thanks.
Before she starts, we had a couple of new people come in. We'll brief you really quickly. The adopted daughter, this is the birth mother, birth grandmother, and this is my adopted mother. So
Yeah.
you can know where you're at.
Yeah. And I'm going to pass you the microphone before you start
Do I
to
clip
speak.
it or hold it or what?
If you can clip it right.
Do you want to clip it?
Up there.
Okay.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, I'm Lorraine Friedman, and I'm the mother of Karen and two other boys, and the grandmother of Debbie, and the great-grandmother of her two children, her lovely children. Karen said I should talk about my feelings, and my first feelings when I found out that she was pregnant, I was angry, I was worried, I was concerned. I didn't know what to do. We lived in a two-bedroom apartment. The boys had one bedroom, Karen had the other. My husband and I slept in the front room. It was lots of fun because the front room was their room to entertain, and we were sleeping. I mean, that was our bedroom, and but it was a very pleasant situation. We made lots of friends when we first moved out here. We had only been here a year when Karen became pregnant. And we both worked, my husband and I, and we were just really scraping along. It was not easy, it was not difficult, we were doing all right, but the thought of another person and a child, I felt it was very important for Karen to continue school at 16. She was a bright student. I felt it would be a shame. I also felt we could not give a baby the proper kind of life that it should have, whatever that should be. I know better now. And we were referred to Vista Del Mar, who referred Karen to Florence Crittenton, where she, after she was able to finish the semester, I think she had 2 or 3 days left of the semester at school, she was able to finish and take the test, so she didn't lose any units. And in July or August, she went into Florence Crittenton, which I must say, from looking outside inside, really, if it hadn't been for the pregnancy, was a very pleasant experience. They were absolutely wonderful. We had counseling. Karen made a lifelong friend that she still has now. It really was a very interesting experience and a very pleasant, otherwise, experience. When Karen had the baby, we were at the hospital, and we saw the baby. When she signed the final adoption papers, we were at Vista Del Mar, and I held the baby. And it was like a door slamming, you know. That was the end. You would never, it was like a death. You would never see that baby again. That was 25 years ago. There was no reason that I would believe that we would ever see the baby again. But it was the best decision that we made at the time, and that was it. And not to know if the baby would marry, grow up, what would happen to her, it was a terrible, terrible decision, very hard decision. But we did it. But I must say, unfortunately, we never talked about it, Karen and I. I felt if you didn't talk about it, it would sort of go away, and why make her talk about it if she didn't feel like it? And after all these years, it's too bad, because we really never talked about the baby or the adoption. I felt she was doing okay, she thought I was doing okay, and we went along. And just a couple days ago, I was quoting something that Karen had, somebody had interviewed her when she was searching. And she said, alone and afraid. And I was telling someone, I really resented that, because we were very supportive of her. My husband saw her every day. I saw her on the weekends with her girlfriends. We went out for lunch. I felt that we were supportive. When she came home, we let her lead her life as if nothing happened, which was a mistake. And I mentioned to somebody that she had written alone and afraid, and I took offense. And interesting, it's just after 25 years I'm finding out that, and my friend said to me, she was alone and afraid. And I said, but she wasn't, because we were there. And he says, but she was alone. You could be with 100 people and be alone. She really was alone, and she was afraid, and you really missed on something. And it took 25 years to hear it from somebody else, so I apologize. The happiest moment in my life was when we started searching for Debbie, and we found her. And it was a long time before I met her. And so I went into a support group because she did not want to have any part of the extended family. And it was very hard for me to accept the fact that I was not part of her family, because I felt very much a part. And I wrote her a letter, and she misunderstood the letter, and so there was a big gap there. And so I had a vicarious thrill. I got pictures, and I saw the baby, but I never actually met Debbie. And I was up and they live up in Pismo, and I happened to be up there one weekend, and I hadn't told Karen I was coming. And I called and said, I'm here. And she said, uh-oh. She said, Debbie's here. And I said, okay, I won't even come over. So she called back. She said, come on over. She wants to meet you. And so I went, and this was maybe 9 months, 10 months. Yeah, baby wasn't quite a year. Jason wasn't quite a year. And I went over, and she shook my hand. And it was a very superficial kind of a meeting. And her girlfriend was there, who was very sweet. And when it was time for me to go, her girlfriend got up and gave me a kiss, and I kissed her. And I had never met her before, very warm. And Debbie came over, and I said, I'm not going to shake your hand, because that's not the kind of relationship I want. And it sort of broke the ice, but it still took a long time for us to really get close. And I think it happened maybe about a year ago when she came up to visit, and she was only going to come for lunch, and she ended up staying overnight, and we did a lot of talking, and from then on things have been very wonderful and nice. She was wonderful when her grandfather was ill. The two boys never had much connection with Debbie. The oldest one is 38. He was in the bedroom with my husband, and Debbie went in, and they were in there for a long time. And when Debbie came out, she said, now I know I have an uncle. And he came out and didn't know what she had said to me, and he said to me, now I know I have a niece. So it was a very binding kind of experience. And it's been a very pleasant, very happy relationship. I met Esther. Esther has been very supportive through Norm's illness, and it has been very nice. So we have a real extended family, and it's lovely. And we're very fortunate. So that's about it. That's up to date. Here we are. Yes?
I'd kind of like to ask some questions
Sure.
of you as a generic birth grandmother. It's not someone that we hear from very often. We have a couple people in a support group that I'm involved with who have made contact with a birth mom and the door has been shut. And because they've had this overriding need to feel a connection, interestingly enough, they've said, well, maybe I should approach my birth grandmother. And these are probably families where there's not communication between grandma and mom. Would you have any sense of, if you hadn't felt like you were close with the adoption process, if you had been more isolated, do you have any sense of what it would have been like if an adoptee had come knocking at your door?
Well, it's funny that you should mention it, because that was always my fantasy, that someday there would be a knock at the door and I'd open the door and there would be this person and she'd say, I'm your granddaughter. And we never spoke about it.
Fantasy too.
That was but we never knew it because we never spoke about it.
Was that a good fantasy or a...
No, it was a good fantasy. No, I wished very strongly that would happen, because I knew there was no way that we would ever find this child. And if she didn't come knocking at my door, we would never find her. And I knew that she'd never come at the door either, so yeah, it was kind of...
Did it ever dawn on you to search?
I didn't know that they were doing searches. I had a very dear friend whose mother worked at Vista Del Mar, and she happened to know about Karen, and she mentioned to me one day, she said, my mother is doing searches. And I said, what's a search? She said, if you're interested in finding your granddaughter, I think my mother can help you. And so I called Karen, and of course she jumped at it and came flying down from Pismo, and we went to see the social worker, who was wonderful, and gave us a lot of support and a lot of hope, and through her and through Karen's hard work, we did find her, yeah.
But it was something that before that had just not occurred?
No, I didn't think there was ever a possibility. I mean, I had never heard that they were opening the records. I never heard that you could make a search. It was just completely beyond my realm of thinking that there was such a thing.
Was this before that there's been a lot in the paper, about searches? Was this actually before?
Yeah, this 5 years. We're talking about 5 years ago.
Actually, it was real interesting. What happened was I had read a book because I had a friend that participated in an open adoption in the Ventura County area, and the mother who adopted the child sent her the book Lost and Found. Or no, it was one of Betty's books, and I can't now. Just the name went out. But anyway, it was a book that I read that the adopted mother, had sent, and I read that, and that was when it dawned on me that yes, it was in fact possible. And I had my very, very best friend was also a birth mother who had relinquished a child, and so we talked about it quite a bit, and we made this secret pact that we were going to that year. It was right around Christmas time, I guess, and that year we were going to search. And it was like New Year's Day. They were up watching the football game, and my mother says, by the way, she said, do you know that you can call the agency and get some information? And I was like, This is too weird.
Yeah, no,
It
we
was
set up an
very
appointment,
strange,
yeah.
But it did not occur to me that as a birth parent that I had a right to search. This was 5 years ago, and even though there had been some things on the talk shows and in the media, not as much as there is now. And as a group leader, I can share with you that I have had situations in my group where people have searched out extended family when the reception was not positive with the mother, and they have been most of the time very positive.
One other question for Janelle, Grandma.
Yeah.
Between the relinquishment and finding and meeting Debbie, did you think about her often?
Always, yeah. It wasn't like, oh, there's a face in the crowd and that's my granddaughter kind of. My thoughts were, I thought about her often, yes. And like I say, the fantasy was that she would come knocking at the door and there she would be and say, I'm your granddaughter. You see it on TV and but you know it doesn't ever happen. And I go back again to the unfortunate part that we didn't talk about it. It was not discussed. This fantasy and these feelings that I had, I shared with some friends, but I never shared with my daughter.
Did you talk to your husband?
No, because he was sort of in another, how could you say? No, I did that, yeah.
He was in heavy denial, too.
Yes, and he was not, when we decided to search, he was not supportive. He felt that he was thinking of the adopted parents, how they would feel. He felt it wasn't right. He was a very kind of conservative person. He felt it really wasn't right to do it. And of course, once we found Debbie, that all changed because there was an instant relationship. They really loved each other very much for a short time. But he really, I didn't talk to him about it really. I know when we went to Florence Crittenton, and we left Karen there, he sat in the car and he cried, and that, you know, that was his release. And then he saw her every day because he worked in San Gabriel, and he stopped every morning to see her, just to say hello or whatever.
Why did you go to Florence Crittenton?
I don't know why. That's a good question. I guess we didn't know. We didn't know what else to do. It sounded like a good solution. Our friend was able to get Karen in. It wasn't easy to get in. And we were told, maybe now it is, you know. Yeah.
I never felt that I was sent away because my parents were embarrassed.
Yeah, that wasn't
see
it,
me.
no.
And there were girls there at Florence Crittenton whose parents had sent them there so no one would know they were pregnant. That was not the
No,
case. It
no,
was
it's
more
just-
for my comfort and support. And I have to say that it wasn't a great place to be.
But it
was supportive. I did have support there, and I did make friends.
And we had counseling. We all had counseling. My husband and I and Karen went for counseling, which was very helpful, and a very lovely lady. I don't remember her name, but she was marvelous. And I just sort of an anecdote to this, of when Karen got married and was pregnant, she came back to visit. She lived in Georgia, and she came back to visit with her husband and with her stomach, and the first place she wanted to go to visit was Florence Crittenton to say hello to all her friends. And when she walked in, the receptionist was the same receptionist who had been there, because she was married, what, 2 years after, or 5 years after, Debbie? But they remembered you. And she walked in, they said, Karen, you're here again.
I was great friends with the cook.
But they really were lovely, all of them, yeah. Okay, someone else, take off my clip.
How many years do you think it took you to recover from that experience? Because you got to hold her and got to feel her. How long do you think it took?
It's hard to say. I went on with my life, and I really did. It was just something that I had to do because there was nothing I could do to change it. That's the way it was. I was working, I was busy, I had friends, I had 2 other kids at home, Karen came back. We went on with our life, yeah.
I don't think any of us recovered, though.
Yeah, but didn't talk about it. We had a long talk after we found Debbie. Then we had a long, long talk, and lots of things came out then. But the rest of the family just went on. And the youngest son was 6, He never knew. He never knew anything. And when he was, a couple years ago, he came back for Thanksgiving, and we said, by the way, you have a niece and some nephews, and I think at Thanksgiving we all had name tags because nobody knew who anybody was. It was very interesting.
Even after the reunion, there's still some recovery that will never be healed because you can't go back and fix it. And you can't even say, I would have done it this way, because that's never the case. It's, you make a decision right then and there. So some healing is just never accomplished. It's just always going to be in limbo.
It's been 3 years today that we gave up my first grandbaby, and I can still feel her, I can smell her, and everything.
Yeah.
And the thing that haunts me the most is our daughter was adopted, so I can remember the day that we took that baby home from the hospital, and then 20 years later, I was giving that same baby into somebody else's arms.
Well, the adoptive child, myself, never conceives that there's a grandparent. I never even conceived that Karen had a mom. I mean, I was too busy thinking about this, meeting her, that to even acknowledge her feelings at all took many years. I mean, even at least 2 years after we met before I could even conceive that she had any feelings about the matter at all, and that they were valid and real. And that was very difficult, because that is just something that you just cannot conceive of. Just conceiving that far is hard. But to the grandparent, it's really surprising to me that you would say that your adoptive child would give up a child for adoption, because when I got pregnant at 19 with my first son, I said, there is no way I'm giving a child up for adoption, not having been adopted myself.
She used to say that even when she was like 8 years old, she'd say, look at me, and we would talk about it. She said, one thing, Mommy, I could never give my baby up. And I would reinforce that and talk to her, and we would do a lot of that. And then, when we found out the day she was pregnant, she said she didn't even know she was pregnant. I took her to the doctor because she'd been in a car accident. And I found out then, my whole world fell apart. And she said, I guess adoption, Mom. And it's like, what do I do? Because, I didn't want to interfere, but I wanted to be supportive. And she says, my life wasn't so bad. I guess that's the best. And because of you being a little bit older, you wonder, raising a child when you're that old, and her not having a job, and all these things. And so you go to somebody, and then you think you're getting the help, and you find out the agency that you're talking to, and please help me, and they're not, is very, very hard to take. But grandparents have no rights, even in this day and age. And I had I didn't have any rights, but I had the responsibility that I was supposed to be there. I took her to the hospital. I was there for the 2.5 days. I was there the day the baby was born. I was there the whole time she was there.
Yeah.
I had to be with her. She wouldn't. I said, Lori, then I think this is your time. Maybe you should just be here with, the girl. No, Daddy had to come.
I've heard Sharon Kaplan speak, and she said that they're doing a lot of open adoptions with her group, and she said she's doing as much counseling now with birth grandparents as she is with birth parents.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad to hear that.
I think they've gotten lost, very lost in the...
Will you counsel with?
Can you speak, I forgot, because we're taping, that if you talk, they're not going to pick up anything on the tape.
Maybe you can repeat it.
Go ahead.
How many of the birth grandmothers that you see adopt the babies themselves?
When I gave up Debbie, that was almost never done.
Well, now
Now that I'm working in a group, I don't know. It doesn't happen very often. My thoughts at that time, my parents said that the decision was mine and that they would support whatever decision I made. But I couldn't see raising my child in my mother's house. And I've worked with a lot of teen parents, and I've seen that there's a real conflict sometimes between the grandmother and identifying who the parent is. The adoptions that took place, generally, there was one girl in the home that I remember whose mother was pregnant at the same time, and they were planning to take the baby home. And of course, I have no idea how that ever worked out. But I'd like to go along, for the sake of time, I want to make sure Esther was next on our program. And we were saving Debbie for last. And I want to make sure that we have time to get through everybody. So.
I don't know what to what to say, really. I don't know what to say. I have nothing to say. Can I leave now?
Is the goat for you over here?
Yes, it's too cold in the room.
Okay. Somebody.
But that's my job. I'm first step.
Waiting for the
I thought it was just me and no one was sitting shivering.
How do you feel about the fear of her?
By the way, while we take a minute while he's fixing the thermostat, I'm Curry Wolf, I'm from ISC, who is hosting a conference, and I am the one that's encouraging everyone to fix the thermostat. If you're ever in a conference room and it is extremely cold or extremely hot, take it upon yourself to go down to the house phones, dial 0 for operator, request Tony Lewis, and tell them it's too hot or too cold to tell them in the room, and they will come right down and fix it. Don't sit in a room and be totally uncomfortable and miserable because you don't know if it's appropriate enough to speak out. Hopefully those of us with the post badges, you said they're warm.
No, I'm starting here.
Warm.
Yeah.
But I was like, starting to go, no, but it was starting to get cold in here. So if you ever see that, please, by all means, request or find someone with one of the blue ribbons and say, it's too cold in such and such a room, and we'll take care of it. Or too hot.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Esther, and I'm Debbie's adoptive mother. And it's, I guess, relevant to the chronological situation is that we have adopted already a boy before Debbie, about 2 years earlier, and he was through private adoption. So we were not completely strange to the adoption process, except it was different because it was through an agency. So when we decided, my husband and I decided that it's time to have another child, because my husband loved this boy to death, and I said, well, this poor baby is going to grow up, his only child, and he's going to be spoiled rotten, and I don't should not be an only child. And we looked into the issue of looking to adopting a second child. At that time, we were already slowing down, really was getting more difficult to adopt children, and we were a little bit older, and we were kind of reluctant to, we didn't know whether we're going to be able to get a child. And so we went to Vista, and we had all the screening process and everything. And I think the fact that we did have already a child and he's still alive, we didn't beat him to death, so that spoke well for us. So they consented to give us another child, and they, I guess, I don't know what the process is from their point of view, but they decided that we should have a boy and a girl, and so they decided. So they overruled my wishes to have 2 boys, and I'm sorry, but that's the way I felt, and I don't even know. I can't even tell you exactly why I felt this way. But the fact is, I wanted my son to have another boy to grow up with, and not many hidden motives in there. Maybe there were that I'm not even aware of. But the fact is that shortly before, right around Hanukkah, it was shortly before Hanukkah. So December, on November, December. Debbie was born November 1st. No, I'm sorry, 14th.
You're the first.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, I'm confused. In November. I know it was November, December. And so it was... Finally, we were approved, and I'm jumping back and forth. But so we were we didn't have this selection what the adoptive children think there's a table here and you take a pick, you know. It didn't exactly go like that. But they showed us Debbie, and we liked her very much, and we decided we talked. And then there is, again, the coloring was very similar to my husband. He's blonde and has blue eyes, and so we thought, you know, they encouraged us. Oh, the color is okay. You know? Nobody looked at me, but that's at the time they were going by criteria like this. I'm sorry to say, you know, the religion was okay and the color was okay, so who cares what you think, right? So we took her home, and she was 4 weeks old, and she came with this little stuffed toy that they adopted, the foster parents, somebody gave her, and she was, you know, took her into our house, and actually we took our son. He was 2 years old at that time. We took him with us to pick up the baby a few days after we made the decision, and he loved it. So went out to the neighbors. Here's my sister. So he went proud around the neighborhood introducing his sister. So he was very cute, and things were, you know, it was rough with 2 children, and. So the process was not the same. Like, it was not my first child, and the first child was a different situation, because really all of a sudden here you have to take this baby and you don't know what to do. So I was already a little bit more experienced. So I was, you know, basically we had I think we had a pretty good family situation until Debbie turned teenager, and then all hell broke loose, and. Then, along with the teenage problems, we had all of a sudden this issue with the adoption. And to regress for a moment, at Vista, we did have to sign the fact that we will tell our child that it's adopted. And my husband and I had this huge argument, and I said, yes, of course, there's no question in my mind that we tell a child that's adopted, and he didn't want to tell the children that they're adopted. And I said, well, I can't. You won. Well, I won, and I said, I will not build my life on a lie. All of a sudden, they turn 18 or 20. How do you do? You're adopted. So, I didn't want to, you know. I don't know how your father feels about it now, but at that time I just persevered, and I said there is no way I will go through that and have a child go through that. And so since we were very little, we bought them books. Vista gave us books about adoption, and we read them, the stories and everything. And there were never hidden. And if they had any questions or any misgivings or whatever, and it was okay to come and talk to me about. And I don't know, Karen says that it's unusual, but I don't know. That's the way I felt. I could not build my life on a lie with a child. And that's, I felt very strongly about it. And I wanted to say something about Vista's whole policy. When it started being a little bit more open not open adoption, but the subject of the adoption and search and everything was a little bit more open, they started having seminars and conferences with parents, and a forum for parents to come and share. And we did take advantage of that, again, over my husband's objection. But he came, and I don't know how he felt about it, because he really didn't, he would have liked, again, to just pretend like nothing, and this is my child, and, but I overruled him. For once. And then at one point, they started offering a workshop with the adoptee, to bring the adoptee. And our son Charles, we mentioned it to him, and he didn't want to come, but Debbie did want to come, and I think it was very helpful. So the parents met in one room, and their children met in another room, all age children, and it was very interesting, and Debbie, I think, benefited quite a bit from that. And that's kind of, I started thinking about the process of maybe, I I was looking, I was really searching. And I wasn't even really clear about my motives at this point. But I just felt that if I would be in their place and all of a sudden this missing pieces, this unknown and these questions, and so since we have been constantly in touch with the Vista and with these conferences, I felt...
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B. The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 10th to the 14th, 1991 in Anaheim. This is program number D, 151, tape 11B.
I didn't do it. Really,
It wasn't.
Yeah.
I can't say if at the time I thought, well, this is her saying, you know, I really want to be more, that's her way of being, or if she was saying, I'm going to push this and you're not going to shake my hand, you're going to, you know, you're going to hug me because I want that kind of relationship. To be quite frank, I really don't remember what I felt at that time because, like she said, the situation was I was already pissed off because I thought I was set up. And so probably she could have cried and said, I held you once and I've always wanted to hold you again, and it would not have meant anything to me at the time.
It was a long time after that. I mean, we were not friendly right away. Even after that, I didn't see her, or if I talked to her, it was sort of a superficial kind of talk.
But she knew, I mean, she knew where you were at.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know if she did. I don't think she really cared where I was at. I really
Yeah,
had that
just
feeling.
wasn't
She
ready to
really
deal with the
didn't
issue,
care.
so I just
Because I had
pretty much
written,
wrote her off.
I had written her a very nice letter, and she never answered. And I asked my daughter about the letter, and Karen said something, that you said something that patience is not your virtue, which it's not. And Debbie took it personally. I was
like,
very
well,
angry.
Too bad. You
Yeah.
know, now you're really gonna wait.
Yeah, I did.
But really, you know, there are those feelings of just don't push me because it's hard enough to be found and to go through your own adjustment and the adjustment that I was having my own child. That I probably was nasty, you know, to Lorraine.
I'm hearing
You
a
had
lot of.
excuse me, there was a question right here, and then you.
This is changing a little bit, but because we're talking so much about open adoption now, and I know we can't look back, but in your perspective from now, if you could go back, how would you feel about having an open adoption? And do you think you could have handled it, both moms? And how did you feel, Debbie? How do you think you would have reacted to an open adoption?
Okay, open adoption being everybody knowing everybody.
That you having all of the information and you could have seen them and maybe saw them as just a friend or knew who they were and
Yeah.
growing up, extended
God,
family.
it seems like it would probably have been pretty confusing. Pretty confusing because I think that I would have played like both ends against the middle. I would have used certain things to manipulate her. I would have used certain things to manipulate her, and the situation could have become very manipulative, quite frankly. And I think that
Even with ground rules.
even with ground rules, because you know what, ground rules do not cover emotions. You know, emotions overrule any ground rule. Because if you feel them, they need to come out, you know. And that includes a lot of screaming and bitterness and manipulative, nasty things, so.
I have a question.
About the mothers though.
I would like to say that it's hard to put that into perspective because what would have been at that time, I think an open adoption would have been very difficult because there wasn't any support for it in the society, and there also was no information, no role models. They're totally different than it is now. The question that it would have been helpful for me if I had known the people, at least to know that my daughter was okay and was being taken care of. For a birth mother, that is a real difficult one when you don't know anything. You know nothing, whether that child is even still alive. So, those things are real critical differences. But in terms of trying to figure out how it would have worked or not worked is very hard to say.
This question really never been put to me, and I had a few minutes to think about it. I don't think I would have adopted a child under those circumstances, quite frankly. And my ex-husband is not here to speak for himself, but I know that he would have been extremely threatened and probably would not have agreed to the same, to adoption under these circumstances.
I think it's important to say, though, that open adoption is not new just now. A long time ago, when records weren't sealed, it was more open. People knew each other. A lot of times, long before the records were sealed, a young extended mother would live with the couple, and everyone knew everything, and there weren't all these secrets.
Right. What she's saying is very true, that open adoption prior to the 40s and 50s, when things started closing down, was a very natural process. And I think that's the direction that we're moving now. That's a very healthy one. But back in that Middle Ages there, it would be very difficult to say.
Now, if you had that, you think you could.
If I had a choice, if I was pregnant now, most definitely, no question about it.
And what if there was insightful, loving woman like Esther who said, under these circumstances, no? Then what would you have done?
Then I probably would not have consented to that placement. If it wasn't right for everybody in that situation, then that would have not been the people that I would have chosen.
And that might not be an optimum solution either, because then you may be, passing up a good home because of a stipulation.
Right.
So.
That's the differences in people. See, as an adoptive parent and going through what I've gone through, I would never adopt a child again unless I had complete openness.
Right.
So see, that's just a difference.
Yeah, but that's after going through with that.
That's
But
what I mean.
I'm trying to place myself 25 years ago.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. So I mean, to fight for it or to know exactly
Right.
how
See,
we're going through.
it was a difficult question because we could do a whole panel on
Right.
that. What my feelings are about would it work for me now as opposed to would it have worked for me 25 years ago. So it's very difficult to answer that. There was another question
I'm
here.
hearing a lot of Debbie saying, on my terms, and I'm not ready for this. Did Karen ever say that to you? Did she say, wait a minute here, did you ever have to back off and let Debbie kind of, or did Debbie call the shots?
Let me tell you, we are very much alike. We are both really outspoken go-getters, and she was so gung-ho for everything that I would let her have that I really felt in control, and I felt like I could moderate it. I could let her have a little more, pull back. I really did feel that way, and I liked that feeling because I felt that, and I still feel this is really snotty and selfish, but I still feel that this is my show, that this happened to me, even though they all are involved. I still feel that way. So she never said, slow down or I'm not ready. She was ready, but I really did control.
I think that's a valid thing.
I wasn't sure about that.
I have to say,
From your standpoint, is it hard to?
I was very fortunate because I was in a support group and there was some time that passed from the time that I started my search to the time I found her. And I had the benefit of other people's experiences and I read everything I could get my hands on. It was scary because I did feel that she was controlling the situation, but I felt like that was necessary, and I still feel that in a search, and that's the personal position that I come from in my group, is that that's an area over your life for adoptees that they didn't have any control over. And so at this point, that is something she has control over. At first, in a relationship, there was a real fear that after I first met her, that then she would vanish and I would never see her again, or that she wouldn't like me. There was also, I was really threatened when she met her birth father for the first time, and I was scared to death that she would like him better than she liked me after I'd gone through all of that searching, And I was really upset about that. I was scared. But I felt that that was her choice, and I had a lot of support, and I knew it up here. In here, it hurt. In here it was difficult, and there were times where I felt like she really doesn't like me, and I wondered sometimes about her motives, whether she really liked me or whether she just wanted, the excitement of the relationship, or, there were some questions. But because Debbie has always been so outspoken, it's made it easier because there was never any question about what she felt. She was always real upfront about it.
And if I didn't like something, I did
She let me
pull the brakes hard. And, I sometimes feel guilty, about, manipulating other people's feelings and things like that. But, I still would do it the same if I had to do it again.
I'm more confident now in the relationship that if I feel that my feelings have been hurt, that I'm freer to express that, or if I'm upset about something, I can express that to her, where at first I was a little afraid to express that. Yeah. I think we're probably over time. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to ask Debbie, and I don't think we ever discussed this. Did you ever wonder why Grandma didn't keep the baby?
That was her question. She just like,
Yeah.
Never even.
You never thought about? Okay.
I really didn't.
Because I often wondered if you ever felt that way.
Yeah,
And,
it's
yeah.
a legitimate point, but
Yeah, why didn't you? There you were, why didn't you keep me?
Yeah,
Instead
no.
of,
I think having had a baby, also gave me a whole nother perspective, really, in meeting Karen, because I don't think I would have been able to have emotional attachments like that unless I had just been through something that brought up, when you have a baby, that brings up family and all those emotional attachments. That probably helped the situation.
Esther, did you have anything else?
In closing, Mom has to say.
No, I don't
Have dinner reservations.
No. No, I really, I don't have anything to say in closing, but I thought maybe you wanted to mention the tape I gave you.
Oh. Yeah, that was
Important issue.
a real singer. The first time Esther came up to visit me by herself with a friend, and she gave me a videotape that she had taken all of their movies, old home movies that she had had from the time Debbie was a baby till the time she was about 8 or 9, I guess, along with some pictures of her brother, and put it on a video for me. And I didn't know what it was when she first gave me. She gave me a video, and she's so low-key. She was like, oh, here's this video, and I didn't even at first realize what it was she was giving me. And then when I realized, I was so overwhelmed that I really couldn't watch it right then. And she asked me if I was going to watch it while she was there, and I said no, I thought that I needed to be alone when I saw it. And I've only watched it twice. It was very difficult. It was real exciting to see her as a baby, but it was very hard. It was hard.
a gift.
Yeah.
And you letting her into that was,
Yeah.
was really, and I was mad about the whole thing.
You were?
Yeah, you don't.
Just stay tuned, guys.
No, I mean, how else can, as a mother, I think I feel like I would have liked to see how my child was at 2 or at 3 or at 4 or growing up or anything like that. And
It's very true, but it's also very painful.
Yeah.
Because you miss all of that.
Yeah. It's
You
very
love seeing
precious.
it,
I-
but it's like,
well,
yeah.
I
It's
came
very-
from the positive point
It's
of
a
view.
wonderful gift.
It was very precious to me, and it still is very precious, although it was difficult to watch. I appreciated the fact that she was willing to share that with me. Yeah. And thank you for coming, and I really
Yes,
appreciate
thank you very
the fact
much.
that you didn't leave. You asked wonderful questions. Thank you.
This concludes this session.